How's it going? It's Man Tomorrow here. I want to thank you guys for coming through. I thank you for like, share, comment, subscribe, stay and subscribe to my channel. Today or tonight, we're going to go over the Cornerstone speech. Hit the one in the chat if you could be able to hear me before we go forward. All right. So the reason why we need to have this conversation, or even the reason why we have Juneteenth in the first place, is because most of the people from the actual area itself in the South was routinely trying to change history. And they do it now. They do it through textbooks, they do it through several types of medium, they do it through all that stuff. And there's really nothing wrong itself with history, actually learning from it, doing the actual things that you need to do to make sure that it don't return. And overall, learning the lesson one time so that way you won't be able to keep going to the same thing over and over. But there becomes a time in history where the actual people from the Confederacy isn't even talking about the Civil War anymore. You have people who are black who don't even live in the South, who tries at this point to rewrite American history. And for reasons that they don't actually benefit from. So for me, I'm from Mississippi. They actually teach this stuff, well, as long as you live in liberal areas, by the way, because there are some places in Mississippi to where they don't even teach the history. I met somebody in the military from Mississippi. This dude didn't even know who Jefferson Davis was. Had no idea Jefferson Davis was the governor of Mississippi, the president of the Confederacy. They had no idea that he was a senator from the state. Had no idea about any of that stuff. Because actually, depending on what county you're in Mississippi, you get a whole different level of teaching or quote unquote misteaching from the actual same history that everybody should. Now, I don't know how you would actually say Happy Juneteenth to people. I don't know how you can even engage in that. But it's just a constant reminder of this was the official end to the Civil War. And the official end to the Civil War was just as important as the Cornerstone speech, the speech that was given by the vice presidency of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens. Again, if we learn this history one time, we wouldn't have to keep going over this over and over again. Like, look, you can stick to your gender war content. You can pretend that you're helping these dudes out. You could be a constant cancer among the actual space. You can make sure people are not really focused on getting their stuff together, but keeping their complaints super high. You can do all that. What's going on, though?
Hey, what's going on, MOT?
Yeah, home, sir.
Did MOT pass fall out?
All right, there we go. Sorry about that phone call. Yeah, but this is what we have to keep going through, like every couple of years. What's going on, Complex? Going on XD, AO, K Diggy, Little Rock. But isn't it such a problem that we have to keep relitigating history to go? Like history that should have been over with a long time ago.
Well, you have some misguided people who are trying to push certain narratives for what reasons. To me, I'm still confused. But yeah, you have some people looking to push certain narratives for rather you know rather suspicious of why one would be doing something like that. But yeah, but you have those who are pushing misinformation, and then you have those who without a doubt, um, ignorant about things. So both are bad, because they end up at the same bottom of the well. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with that on a regular and consistent basis, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's called spiritualogical. Yeah, but that's just currently where we are, and it's not like the Cornerstone speech only existed because I pulled it up on YouTube. This stuff has been here forever. It has been published in 1861. This is published.
It was a very famous speech. Historians, everybody, know about this. So this is nothing, that's new or really or obfuscated in any way. It's out there. People see they see what's going on here. So it's important to put this information out. I will say this: a lot of people are just not up on American history, so that's why some people can come in and make certain kinds of ridiculous statements and yet get a lot of support, because a lot of people just don't really know. And that's on both sides. I've seen black people this way, white folks very much the same. We see it kind of, it just goes around. We are very, very, very um, history unfocused. We don't focus on our history a lot. We want to think about present day and all that, but we don't want to talk about what went on in the past, even though that shapes the events that for the future, or even the events that we're in now, where things are coming from. A lot of what we're seeing today and pushing up comes directly from those days, of course. And they've always been with us. But you have those who are actually trying to cover a lot of this history up, and make it seem like it's something different. But no, this is very important for us to know, because it's very relevant. It was relevant then. Maybe some things have changed, but the relevancy of that past is absolutely critical to what's going on today. And that's what a lot of people just don't want you to make, those solid connections, for different reasons. But history is important, and many of us don't know it. Many of us, we just don't know it, and that is a problem.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, okay, so how do you go from like this is like one of the biggest events in American history. I mean, you don't have the Naval War College, you don't have the Army War College, who trained all these generals, by the way, on both sides of the actual Civil War. You don't hear them even saying it. You have the History Channel, multiple documentaries. It's nearly impossible that people haven't seen it, or maybe they went out of their way to dodge the information that's out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, why someone like this other person would be pushing that is beyond me. Um, it's ridiculous. All of your major your historians, your institutions, they talk about this because this war it defined us in so many ways as a nation. We have many historians, Southern as well as Northern historians. We could talk about Ken Burns and his famous, Civil War documentary that was record breaking and award winning, and really put the history down for the first time, really in a big way that people really could look at it and see it. I remember watching the 4-night event, and I remember watching that on PBS and watching it closely. and Ken Burns was lionized for it. But yet you had very strong Southern historians like Shelby Foote and others who were there, Bruce Catton and others who were Southerners who really watched, who really looked at the history, and they broke it down from a Southern perspective. And they told you exactly what that was about as well. And it wasn't based on some tariffs or anything else like that. Not to say that tariffs and these things were not ancillary or had some effect on the war. The reason as to why this war was had was because of the Southerners seceding because of slavery, and that was, pretty much the bottom line behind the whole incident. And we're very, very, very um, unified in understanding that. But there are those who want to hold out and push another narrative. For that, once again, we would say of the lost cause, and that lost cause was basically fomented and pushed forward by Southern Confederate strategists who politically wanted to use that, and those who were after the war and in the earlier part of the 20th century to animate that idea to make the South not look like it was a slaving, vicious economy, but that these were noble people holding up a noble lost cause, which which is pretty much a lie, and that's what that's what they're pushing. And to have black people, black men in particular, really trying to push that narrative is disturbing.
I mean, but one would have to ask, what is the overall benefit and gain
There is none. It's
of
just
pushing such a narrative?
there is none. It's just crazy Negroes. I just look at this as crazy Negroes just out here just saying some of the craziest, most shine bone type stuff that I've seen, really in the last 20 years. I've never seen the high levels of shine bonery and just coonery and so forth really run at the level that it's running at now, and where it's being shown at levels that I find amazing. Where you hear people, public officials even saying, things such as, Jim Crow, was beneficial. I mean, just some of the stuff that's just coming out of some of these people's mouths is beyond comprehension. There's no doubt there is a grift, or Maggle grift, and so forth that's really being pushed, and it's surprising to see black men at certain levels really embrace this. I understand why some of this is. I do understand why some of it is, and a lot of that is rooted in the aspects of in many of the aspects of Keisha, but it's still really crazy, that many brothers are taking this stance to grift on. It's disturbing.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to play the actual Cornerstone speech from Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy. This speech was made before there was an actual Civil War. This was made in March of 1861. But without further ado, we're just going to play this. Because when we say that we have sources, what other source can we talk about this from, if not from the Vice President of the Confederacy themselves? I mean, the
That's
great
pretty
thing
strong.
about today's history is that normally your misinformation can be backed up by specious sources. And then once you look at the article or you look at the publication that actually publishes such misinformation, you'll realize that there really ain't that many spaces for that, and it's just crazy. But let's just play this.
This is a strategic scholar's reading of a speech known as the Cornerstone speech, delivered by Alexander H. Stephens on March 21st, 1861. Stephens, a career politician, served in the United States Congress until the state of Georgia seceded from the Union. Shortly thereafter, he was elected Vice President of the Confederate States of America. Less than 1 month before the outbreak of the American Civil War, Stevens delivered the Cornerstone speech, which discusses the differences between the U.S. Constitution and the Confederate Constitution. Most notably, Stevens indicates that slavery, quote, was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution, end quote, and that the Confederate government is founded upon, quote, the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, and that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition, end quote. This reading of the Cornerstone speech is taken from Alexander Stevens, In Public and Private, with Letters and Speeches, Before, During, and Since the War, published in 1866, starting on page 718, after introductory remarks. The Cornerstone Speech, by Alexander H. Stevens. When perfect quiet is restored, I shall proceed. I cannot speak so long as there is any noise or confusion. I shall take my time. I feel quite prepared to spend the night with you if necessary. I very much regret that everyone who desires cannot hear what I have to say. Not that I have any display to make, or anything very entertaining to present, but such views as I have to give, I wish all, not only in this city, but in this state, and throughout our Confederate Republic, could hear, who have a desire to hear them. I was remarking that we are passing through one of the greatest revolutions in the annals of the world. 7 states have, within the last 3 months, thrown off an old government and formed a new. This revolution has been signally marked, up to this time, by the fact of its having been accomplished without the loss of a single drop of blood. This new constitution, or form of government, constitutes the subject to which your attention will be partly invited. In reference to it, I make this first general remark. It amply secures all our ancient rights, franchises, and liberties. All the great principles of Magna Carta are retained in it. No citizen is deprived of life, liberty, or property, but by the judgment of his peers under the laws of the land. The great principle of religious liberty, which was the honor and pride of the old Constitution, is still maintained and secured. All the essentials of the old Constitution, which have endeared it to the hearts of the American people, have been preserved and perpetuated. Some changes have been made. Of these I shall speak presently. Some of these I should have preferred not to have seen made, but these, perhaps, meet the cordial approbation of a majority of this audience, if not an overwhelming majority of the people of the Confederacy. Of them, therefore, I will not speak. But other important changes do meet my cordial approbation. They form great improvements upon the old Constitution. So, taking the whole new Constitution, I have no hesitancy in giving it as my judgment that it is decidedly better than the old. Allow me briefly to allude to some of these improvements. The question of building up class interests or fostering one branch of industry to the prejudice of another under the exercise of the revenue power, which gave us so much trouble under the old Constitution, is put at rest forever under the new. We allow the imposition of no duty with the view of giving advantage to one class of persons in any trade or business over those of another. All, under our system, stand upon the same broad principles of perfect equality. Honest labor and enterprise are left free and unrestricted in whatever pursuit they may be engaged. This subject came well nigh causing a rupture of the old Union, under the lead of the gallant Palmetto State, which lies on our border in 1833. This old thorn of the tariff, which was the cause of so much irritation in the old body politic, is removed forever from the new. Again, the subject of internal improvements, under the power of Congress to regulate commerce, is put at rest under our system. The power claimed by construction under the old Constitution was at least a doubtful one. It rested solely upon construction. We of the South, generally apart from considerations of constitutional principles, opposed its exercise upon grounds of its inexpediency and injustice. Notwithstanding this opposition, millions of money from the common treasury had been drawn for such purposes. Our opposition sprang from no hostility to commerce, or all necessary aids for facilitating it. With us, it was simply a question upon whom the burden should fall. In Georgia, for instance, we have done as much for the cause of internal improvements as any other portion of this country, according to population and means. We have stretched out lines of railroads from the seaboard to the mountains, dug down the hills, and filled up the valleys at a cost of not less than $25 million. All this was done to open an outlet for our products of the interior, and those to the west of us to reach the marts of the world. No state was in greater need of such facilities than Georgia, but we did not ask that these works should be made by appropriations out of the common treasury. The cost of the grading, the superstructure, and equipments of our roads was borne by those who entered on the enterprise. Nay, more, not only the cost of the iron, no small item in the aggregate cost, was borne in the same way, but we were compelled to pay into the common treasury several millions of dollars for the privilege of importing the iron after the price was paid for it abroad. What justice was there in taking this money, which our people paid, into the common treasury on the importation of our iron and applying it to the improvement of rivers and harbors elsewhere? The true principle is to subject the commerce of every locality to whatever burdens may be necessary to facilitate it. If Charleston Harbor needs improvement, let the commerce of Charleston bear the burden. If the mouth of the Savannah River has to be cleared out, let the seagoing navigation, which is benefited by it, bear the burden. So with the mouths of the Alabama and Mississippi River. Just as the products of the interior, our cotton, wheat, corn, and other articles, have to bear the necessary rates of freight over our railroads to reach the seas. This is, again, the broad principle of perfect equality and justice, and it is especially set forth and established in our new Constitution. Another feature to which I will allude is that the new Constitution provides that cabinet ministers and heads of departments may have the privilege of seats upon the floor of the Senate and House of Representatives, may have the right to participate in the debates and discussions upon the various subjects of administration. I should have preferred that this provision should have gone further and required the President to select his constitutional advisors from the Senate and House of Representatives. That would have conformed entirely to the practice in the British Parliament, which, in my judgment, is one of the wisest provisions in the British Constitution. It is the only feature that saves that government. It is that which gives it stability in its facility to change its administration. Ours, as it is a great approximation to the right principle. Under the old Constitution, a Secretary of the Treasury, for instance, had no opportunity, save by his annual reports, of presenting any scheme or plan of finance or other matter. He had no opportunity of explaining, expounding, enforcing, or defending his views of policy. His only resort was through the medium of an organ. In the British Parliament, the Premier brings in his budget and stands before the nation responsible for its every item. If it is indefensible, he falls before the attacks upon it, as he ought to. This will now be the case to a limited extent under our system. In the new Constitution, provision has been made by which our heads of departments can speak for themselves and the administration in behalf of its entire policy, without resorting to the indirect and highly objectionable medium of a newspaper. It is to be greatly hoped that under our system we shall never have what is known as a government organ. Another change in the Constitution relates to the length of the tenure of the presidential office. In the new Constitution, it is 6 years instead of 4, and the president rendered ineligible for re-election. This is certainly a decidedly conservative change. It will remove from the incumbent all temptation to use his office or exert the powers confided to him for any objects of personal ambition. The only incentive to that higher ambition, which should move and actuate one holding such high trusts in his hands, will be the good of the people, the advancement, prosperity, happiness, safety, honor, and true glory of the Confederacy. But not to be tedious in enumerating the numerous changes for the better, allow me to allude to one other, though last, not least. The new Constitution has put at rest, forever, all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists amongst us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, had anticipated this as the rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact. But whether he fully comprehended the great truth upon which that rock stood and stands may be doubted. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil they knew not well how to deal with, but the general opinion of the men of that day was that, somehow or other, in the order of providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away. This idea, though not incorporated in the Constitution, was the prevailing idea at that time. The Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to the institution while it should last, and hence no argument can be justly urged against the constitutional guarantees thus secured, because of the common sentiment of the day. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the government built upon it fell when the storm came and the wind blew. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. It has been so even amongst us. Many who hear me, perhaps, can recollect well that this truth was not generally admitted, even within their day. The errors of the past generation still clung to many as late as 20 years ago. Those at the North, who still cling to these errors with a zeal above knowledge, we justly denominate fanatics. All fanaticism springs from an aberration of the mind, from a defect in reasoning. It is a species of insanity. One of the most striking characteristics of insanity, in many instances, is forming correct conclusions from fancied or erroneous premises. So with the anti-slavery fanatics. Their conclusions are right if their premises were. They assume that the Negro is equal, and hence conclude that he is entitled to equal privileges and rights with the white man. If their premises were correct, their conclusions would be logical and just, but their premise being wrong, their whole argument fails. I recollect once of having heard a gentleman from one of the northern states, of great power and ability, announce in the House of Representatives, with imposing effect, that we of the South would be compelled, ultimately, to yield upon this subject of slavery, that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics or mechanics, that the principle would ultimately prevail, that we, in maintaining slavery as it exists with us, were warring against a principle founded in nature, the principle of the equality of men. The reply I made to him was, that upon his own grounds we should ultimately succeed, and that he and his associates in this crusade against our institutions would ultimately fail. The truth announced that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics and mechanics, I admitted, but told him that it was he and those acting with him who were warring against a principle. They were attempting to make things equal which the Creator had made unequal. In the conflict thus far, success has been on our side, complete throughout the length and breadth of the Confederate States. It is upon this, as I have stated, our social fabric is firmly planted, and I cannot permit myself to doubt the ultimate success of a full recognition of this principle throughout the civilized and enlightened world. As I've stated, the truth of this principle may be slow in development, as all truths are and ever have been in the various branches of science. It was so with the principles announced by Galileo. It was so with Adam Smith and his principles of political economy. It was so with Harvey and his theory of the circulation of the blood. It is stated that not a single one of the medical profession living at the time of the announcement of the truths made by him admitted them. Now, they are universally acknowledged. May we not, therefore, look with confidence to the ultimate universal acknowledgement of the truths upon which our system rests? It is the first government ever instituted upon the principles in strict conformity to nature and the ordination of providence in furnishing the materials of human society. Many governments have been founded upon the principle of the subordination and serfdom of certain classes of the same race. Such were and are in violation of the laws of nature. Our system commits no such violation of nature's laws. With us, all of the white race, however high or low, rich or poor, are equal in the eye of the law. Not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place. He, by nature, or by the curse against Canaan, is fitted for that condition which he occupies in our system.
This is the
The
vice
architect
president
in the
of the
construction
Confederacy.
of buildings lays the foundation with the proper material, the granite. Then comes the brick or the marble. The substratum of our society.
I mean, the point couldn't be said enough that you were the bottom of society.
Listen to this.
you,
I mean,
you can't say. I mean, he said himself, slavery is what this is about. Our particular institution.
and their this institution, they are looking at this thing from a standpoint not only of just this is their way of life, this is their moral, spiritual, this is
Yes.
their this is economic, this is their whole backup. This is their whole thing. This is this is what their society, their their whole structure is based on. They've based this on this. Taxes? Where did he say taxes? Where did
I mean,
where did he
he
say
didn't say taxes or tariffs. This dude is breaking down. We are built on the cornerstone. You are the granite, the bottom. That's what you are. And you are at the bottom of society, and most men that are white, regardless of class, is above you, and not so for the Negro. They are beneath us.
You are beneath us. You are to be in our servitude. This is the bottom line. This is it. Now, this is not coming because I have a PhD that I want to bring that I want to bring in here, who has written some wonderful books. I may have mentioned him before, Dr. Philip Magnus, but really, we can get into many different scholars, of which we're going to bring up, of which I haven't heard anyone else bring any of the scholars to the table. But you see here directly from the horse's mouth, as they say, right from the vice president of the Confederacy, the Confederate States, that went to war 4 years against, the established United States government, and lost. But this is he's Veep, vice president of this of this new state that these guys were talking about building. Unbelievable, unbelievable. This is what he said. This is not, we're not conjecturing upon this, or we're not trying to analyze. This is what he's saying.
Let's go around top, man. Go on, man.
Hey, what's up? What's up, Nano? What's up, Nicole?
RM, how you doing?
Man, it's right. No, Nicole, you said you're gonna bring in some PhDs. Now, are these PhDs in education? PhDs in music?
Africana studies.
Or are we talking historians here?
I will bring up Dr. Philip. I'll name one, Dr. Philip W. Magnus, PhD. He has his PhD in public policy at George Mason University, and he is a professor of economic and policy history, political economy, and in international trade.
Oh, okay.
So,
Sounds kind of legitimate, man.
So,
Go with that.
Right now, he sits on the David Thoreau Chair of Political Economy at the Independent Institute. He's also a fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. He's an F.A. Hayek Chair in economics and economic history.
Oh, okay.
And he's a director of research and education as well from 21 to 23. And he's also a visiting assistant adjunct professor back from 2017 to 2018 at Berry College, and also adjunct professor of international commerce and policy at George Mason University as well. He's a lecturer at the School of Public Affairs at American University as well. So this is, fairly well-credentialed man. His latest books were Colonization After Emancipation, Lincoln and the Movement for Black Resettlement, which was one of his latest books. Very, very well read. Very.
Oh, he's a published PhD. Okay.
Oh, oh, he's about as real as you can get, and he has written some great stuff along with a few other very well established professors that I will mention as I read this next piece as we move further on. But to get into the whole tariff issue, because that's his real expertise, and some of these other doctors' true expertise is in the areas of taxation, tariffs, and of course of slavery. So they've they've broken this down in some marvelous ways, which few have really gone into detail on. And I'm going to mention some of them. Dr. William Freeling, who did Prelude to the Civil War, the nullification controversy in South Carolina from 1816 to 1836. Philip Magnus, Dr. Philip Magnus, of course, moral and the missing industries, strategic lobbying and behavior, and the tariff. This was a journal article he wrote back in 2009. Mark William Palin, the Civil Wars for Dr. Mark William Palin, the Civil Wars Forgotten Transatlantic Tariff Debate and the Confederacy Free Trade Diplomacy in the Journal of the Civil War Era. And another one who wrote this book a while ago, Luthen Reinhardt, Abraham Lincoln and the Tariff, the American Historical Review. This was written back in 1944, which still seems to be a very strong read today, which is very, very, many people refer to it. And of course, Dr. Palin in his study has used these authors to come through with his last piece, talking about the essentials of the Civil War curriculum. This is at the Civil War Museum also in Virginia, Richmond, and this is on how would I say you can go there and visit this currently, but he talks about tariffs and the American Civil War, and it's an in-depth read, and we'll go through some of that in a minute and talk about this in a little more detail and talk about it a little more cogently as to why certain things came first and why the tariffs were nowhere near the major impetus that made this war happen. Tariffs and taxes and these kind of things could literally be looked at as ancillary to what the war was really about. So these things did come up, but they were not the major driving force. And some of this was actually shaped to look like that was the force for certain political reasons that the South was trying to gain from, which was somewhat mentioned here in the speech um, from the Vice President of the Confederacy, who was more or less stating England and their interest in them in the South, trying to get them involved in that conflict. That was a big part of their motivations for pushing this tariff narrative to kind of get them involved. That was later defeated, but that was one of the big genesis of how this really came about. Anyway, hopefully that explains a little bit. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, the other thing is that I think I said to you guys offline. If when you're talking about Civil War history, this is where Donald Trump, if you remember, back when he was running for the presidency, made the commentary of like, oh, people should go, paraphrasing, and study the causes of the Civil War. And people had to, tap this guy on the shoulder and say, hey, there are literally historians who have dedicated their entire academic career to studying the various causes of the Civil War. So when people bring up ideas about what they think caused the Civil War, it shouldn't just be an article. You should be able to point to entire books that are about this idea.
And PhDs, like we did.
Because that's how specialized Civil War history is.
And it's very deep. You can't grab just somebody who's just looking to some right winger who's looking to push, a certain cause forward for political reasons. We want to be accurate with the facts of what the real case was. So that's why when we bring up people such as the Cornerstone speech, such as Alexander Stevens, or I'm going to go into in a minute on the South Carolina's actual their reason for secession, which they state very clearly. And as I stated before, the last time we were up here with Georgia, and we can go through all of them and state where this is, and then back up, this whole tariff argument, which is rather ridiculous, which gets rather deep, and I know people get a little boring from hearing certain kinds of research being told back to them, but sometimes you have to do some of the heavier work to really understand what was really going on here, and for us to actually know what happened, know how things went on is important, because no one can then sit here and tell you a lie or put something else into your head that's actually not true. This is very critical history. And you have those that are here today, moving in government, moving about in politics, who would like to bring some of these days back. Not maybe exactly how they were in the past, but they would certainly like to recreate some of this or re-anneal it. And that's something that we have to be very, very, very vigilant about, because your opponents are very serious about this as well, about bringing it back. And when you have those who are supposed to be on your inside working against you in certain ways of understanding, you have to look at that as highly suspicious as well. And why would an individual be looking to do that? You have to really look at that with great suspicion. You really have to.
But
It's
but
very
Nagone, like we but Nagone, we only have the technology that we currently have to only discuss gender war topics. There is no way we can drop a link and actually have a discussion where both sides bring their actual statements and credentials of individuals to information. Like that's not possible in today's world. So we have to have this long distance back and forth with the same medium, apparently. So without further ado, let's keep going with this Cornerstone speech.
go ahead.
Society is made of the material fitted by nature for it, and by experience we know that it is best not only for the superior, but for the inferior race, that it should be so. It is, indeed, in conformity with the ordinance of the Creator. It is not for us to inquire into the wisdom of his ordinances or to question them. For his own purposes, he has made one race to differ from another, as he has made one star to differ from another star in glory. The great objects of humanity are best attained when there is conformity to his laws and decrees, in the formation of governments as well as in all things else. Our Confederacy is founded upon principles in strict conformity with these laws. This stone, which was rejected by the first builders, is become the chief of the corner, the real cornerstone in our new edifice. I have been asked, what of the future? It has been apprehended by some that we would have arrayed against us the civilized world. I care not who or how many they may be against us, when we stand upon the eternal principles of truth. If we are true to ourselves and the principles for which we contend, we are obliged to and must triumph. Thousands of people who begin to understand these truths are not yet completely out of the shell. They do not see them in their length and breadth. We hear much of the civilization and Christianization of the barbarous tribes of Africa. In my judgment, those ends will never be attained, but by first teaching them the lesson taught to Adam, that, in the sweat of his brow he should eat his bread, and teaching them to work and feed and clothe themselves. But to pass on, some have propounded the inquiry whether it is practicable for us to go on with the Confederacy without further accessions. Have we the means and ability to maintain nationality among the powers of the earth? On this point, I would barely say that as anxiously as we all have been, and are for the border states, with institutions similar to ours, to join us, still we are abundantly able to maintain our position, even if they should ultimately make up their minds not to cast their destiny with us. That they ultimately will join us, be compelled to do it, is my confident belief, but we can get on very well without them, even if they should not. We have all the essential elements of a high national career. The idea has been given out at the North, and even in the border states, that we are too small and too weak to maintain a separate nationality. This is a great mistake. In extent of territory, we embrace 564,000 square miles and upward. This is upward of 200,000 square miles more than was included within the limits of the original 13 states. It is an area of country more than double the territory of France or the Austrian Empire. France, in round numbers, has but 212,000 square miles. Austria, in round numbers, has 248,000 square miles. Ours is greater than both combined. It is greater than all France, Spain, Portugal, and Great Britain, including England, Ireland, and Scotland together. In population, we have upward of 5 millions, according to the census of 1860. This includes white and black. The entire population, including white and black, of the original 13 states was less than 4 millions in 1790, and still less in 76, when the independence of our fathers was achieved. If they, with a less population, dared maintain their independence against the greatest power on earth, shall we have any apprehension of maintaining ours now? In point of material wealth and resources, we are greatly in advance of them. The taxable property of the Confederate States cannot be less than $3,200 millions. This, I think, I venture but little in saying, may be considered as 5 times more than the colonies possessed at the time they achieved their independence. Georgia, alone, possessed, last year, according to the report of our Comptroller General, 672 millions of taxable property. The debts of the 7 Confederate states sum up in the aggregate less than 18 millions, while the existing debts of the other of the late United States sum in the aggregate the enormous amount of $174 millions. This is without taking into the account the heavy city debts, corporation debts, and railroad debts which press and will continue to press as a heavy incubus upon the resources of those states. These debts, added to others, make a sum total not much under $500 millions. With such an area of territory as we have, with such an amount of population, with a climate and soil unsurpassed by any on the face of the earth, with such resources already at our command, with productions which control the commerce of the world, who can entertain any apprehensions as to our ability to succeed, whether others join us or not? It is true, I believe I state but the common sentiment, when I declare my earnest desire that the border states should join us. The differences of opinion that existed among us anterior to secession related more to the policy in securing that result by cooperation than from any difference upon the ultimate security we all look to in common. These differences of opinion were more in reference to policy than principle, and as Mr. Jefferson said in his inaugural in 1801, after the heated contest preceding his election, there might be differences of opinion without differences on principle, and that all, to some extent, had been Federalists and all Republicans. So it may now be said of us, that whatever differences of opinion as to the best policy in having a cooperation with our border sister slave states, if the worst came to the worst, that as we were all cooperationists, we are now all for independence, whether they come or not. In this connection, I take this occasion to state that I was not without grave and serious apprehensions that if the worst came to the worst, and cutting loose from the old government should be the only remedy for our safety and security, it would be attended with much more serious ills than it has been as yet. Thus far, we have seen none of those incidents which usually attend revolutions. No such material as such convulsions usually throw up has been seen. Wisdom, prudence, and patriotism have marked every step of our progress thus far. This augurs well for the future, and it is a matter of sincere gratification to me that I am enabled to make the declaration. Of the men I met in the Congress at Montgomery, I may be pardoned for saying this: an abler, wiser, a more conservative, deliberate, determined, resolute, and patriotic body of men I never met in my life. Their works speak for them. The provisional government speaks for them. The constitution of the permanent government will be a lasting monument of their worth, merit, and statesmanship. But to return to the question of the future, what is to be the result of this revolution? Will everything commence so well continue as it has begun? In reply to this anxious inquiry, I can only say it all depends upon ourselves. A young man starting out in life on his majority, with health, talent, and ability, under a favoring providence, may be said to be the architect of his own fortunes. His destinies are in his own hands. He may make for himself a name of honor or dishonor according to his own acts. If he plants himself upon truth, integrity, honor, and uprightness, with the industry, patience, and energy, he cannot fail of success. So it is with us. We are a young republic just entering upon the arena of nations. We will be the architects of our own fortunes. Our destiny, under providence, is in our own hands. With wisdom, prudence, and statesmanship on the part of our public men, and intelligence, virtue, and patriotism on the part of the people, success, to the full measures of our most sanguine hopes, may be looked for. But if unwise counsels prevail, if we become divided, if schisms arise, if dissensions spring up, if factions are engendered, if party spirit, nourished by unholy personal ambition, shall rear its hydra head, I have no good to prophesy for you. Without intelligence, virtue, integrity, and patriotism on the part of the people, no republic or representative government can be durable or stable. We have intelligence and virtue and patriotism. All that is required is to cultivate and perpetuate these. Intelligence will not do without virtue. France was a nation of philosophers. These philosophers become Jacobins. They lack that virtue, that devotion to moral principle, and that patriotism which is essential to good government. Organized upon principles of perfect justice and right, seeking amity and friendship with all other powers, I see no obstacle in the way of our upward and onward progress. Our growth, by accessions from other states, will depend greatly upon whether we present to the world, as I trust we shall, a better government than that to which our neighboring states belong. If we do this, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas cannot hesitate long. Neither can Virginia, Kentucky, and Missouri. They will necessarily gravitate to us by an imperious law. We made ample provision in our Constitution for the admission of other states. It is more guarded, and wisely so, I think, than the old Constitution on the same subject, but not too guarded to receive them as fast as it may be proper. Looking to the distant future, and perhaps not very far distant either, it is not beyond the range of possibility, and even probability, that all the great states of the Northwest will gravitate this way, as well as Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, etc. Should they do so, our doors are wide enough to receive them, but not until they are ready to assimilate with us in principle. The process of disintegration in the old Union may be expected to go on with almost absolute certainty if we pursue the right course. We are now the nucleus of a growing power which, if we are true to ourselves, our destiny, and high mission, will become the controlling power on this continent. To what extent accessions will go on in the process of time, or where it will end, the future will determine. So far as it concerns states of the old Union, this process will be upon no such principles of reconstruction as now spoken of, but upon reorganization and new assimilation. Such are some of the glimpses of the future as I catch them. But at first we must necessarily meet with the inconveniences and difficulties and embarrassments incident to all changes of government. These will be felt in our postal affairs and changes in the channel of trade. These inconveniences, it is to be hoped, will be but temporary, and must be borne with patience and forbearance. As to whether we shall have war with our late confederates, or whether all matters of differences between us shall be amicably settled, I can only say that the prospect for a peaceful adjustment is better, so far as I am informed, than it has been. The prospect of war is, at least, not so threatening as it has been. The idea of coercion, shadowed forth in President Lincoln's inaugural, seems not to be followed up thus far so rigorously as was expected. Fort Sumter, it is believed, will soon be evacuated. What course will be pursued toward Fort Pickens and the other forts on the Gulf is not so well understood. It is to be greatly desired that all of them should be surrendered. Our object is peace, not only with the North, but with the world. All matters relating to the public property, public liabilities of the Union when we were members of it, we are ready and willing to adjust and settle upon the principles of right, equity, and good faith. War can be of no more benefit to the North than to us. Whether the intention of evacuating Fort Sumter is to be received as an evidence of a desire for a peaceful solution of our difficulties with the United States, or the result of necessity, I will not undertake to say. I would fain hope the former. Rumors are afloat, however, that it is the result of necessity. All I can say to you, therefore, on that point is, keep your armor bright and your powder dry. The surest way to secure peace is to show your ability to maintain your rights. The principles and position of the present administration of the United States, the Republican Party, present some puzzling questions. While it is a fixed principle with them never to allow the increase of a foot of slave territory, they seem to be equally determined not to part with an inch of the accursed soil. Notwithstanding their clamor against the institution, they seem to be equally opposed to getting more, or letting go what they have got. They were ready to fight on the accession of Texas, and are equally ready to fight now on her secession. Why is this? How can this strange paradox be accounted for? There seems to be but one rational solution, and that is, notwithstanding their professions of humanity, they are disinclined to give up the benefits they derive from slave labor. Their philanthropy yields to their interest. The idea of enforcing the laws has but one object, and that is a collection of the taxes raised by slave labor to swell the fund, necessary to meet their heavy appropriations. The spoils is what they are after, though they come from the labor of the slave. Mr. Stevens reviewed at some length the extravagance and the profligacy of appropriations by the Congress of the United States for several years past, and in this connection took occasion to allude to another one of the great improvements in our new Constitution, which is a clause prohibiting Congress from appropriating any money from the Treasury, except by a 2/3 vote, unless it be for some object which the executive may say is necessary to carry on the government. When it is thus asked for and estimated for, he continued, the majority may appropriate. This was a new feature. Our fathers had guarded the assessment of taxes by insisting that representation and taxation should go together. This was inherited from the mother country, England. It was one of the principles upon which the Revolution had been fought. Our fathers also provided in the old Constitution that all appropriation bills should originate in the representative branch of Congress. But our new Constitution went a step further and guarded not only the pockets of the people, but also the public money after it was taken from their pockets. He alluded to the difficulties and embarrassments which seemed to surround the question of a peaceful solution of the controversy with the old government. How can it be done? Is perplexing many minds. The President seems to think that he cannot recognize our independence, nor can he, with and by the advice of the Senate, do so. The Constitution makes no such provision. A general convention of all the states has been suggested by some. Without proposing to solve the difficulty, he barely made the following suggestion: that as the admission of states by Congress under the Constitution was an act of legislation, and in the nature of a contract or compact between the states admitted and the others admitting, why should not this contract or compact be regarded as of like character with all other civil contracts, liable to be rescinded by mutual agreement of both parties? The seceding states have rescinded it on their part. They have resumed their sovereignty. Why cannot the whole question be settled, if the North desire peace, simply by the Congress, in both branches, with the concurrence of the President, giving their consent to the separation and the recognition of our independence? This he merely offered as a suggestion, as one of the ways in which it might be done with much less violence by constructions to the Constitution than many other acts of that government. The difficulty has to be solved in some way or other. This may be regarded as a fixed fact. Several other points were alluded to by Mr. Stevens, particularly as to the policy of the new government toward foreign nations and our commercial relations with them. Free trade, as far as practicable, would be the policy of this government. No higher duties would be imposed on foreign importations than would be necessary to support the government upon the strictest economy. In olden times, the olive branch was considered the emblem of peace. We will send to the nations of the earth another and far more potential emblem of the same, the cotton plant. The present duties were levied with a view of meeting the present necessities and exigencies in preparation for war, if need be. But if we have peace, and he hoped we might, and trade should resume its proper course, a duty of 10% upon foreign importations, it was thought might be sufficient to meet the expenditures of the government. If some articles should be left on the free list, as they now are, such as breadstuffs, etc., then, of course, duties upon others would have to be higher, but in no event to an extent to embarrass trade and commerce. He concluded in an earnest appeal for union and harmony on part of all the people in support of the common cause in which we were all enlisted, and upon the issues of which such great consequences depend. If, said he, we are true to ourselves, true to our cause, true to our destiny, true to our high mission, in presenting to the world the highest type of civilization ever exhibited by man, there will be found in our lexicon no such word as fail.
Holy stock market.
All right, that's the end of the Cornerstone speech. He was very open about being delusional to the point to where they was going to replace the cotton plant as a means of acting as a symbol of peace to replace the olive branch. Unbelievable. I mean, you would think this guy would be on some type of heavy medication or drugs, but this guy was pretty serious about what they were talking about.
Yeah, who would have?
Yeah.
Could you ever believe that on Juneteenth of all things, you have to be arguing with other black men about the causes of the Civil War, and people would literally be trying to argue that tariffs and not slavery were the main causes. It's quite mind-boggling.
It's unbelievable, but you have them out.
Did he say anything about taxes in that speech? Did he say anything about taxes or tariffs?
No.
He told you exactly how the world was going to be set up for them.
He told you exactly how they perceived their society and their culture was going to move forward. Um, he told you that and told you where your place was in that. Told you you were inferior. You were to be um, in servitude. You were to be in the bonds of servitude, um, and how they could potentially look to expand that 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 practice of their culture outside of the where they are into the border states as well. So this is what they were concerned about in every way possible. This is what this was about for them. This is not subjective. This is not anything that they fooled around with. I was expecting um, the other person to come up with the Empire of Cotton, a book that was written speaking about certainly slavery, but what I guess they couldn't use that book too well because it did speak to how strong slavery actually added to literally added to capitalism, and how capitalism floated on the back of slavery, and they actually expanded capitalism here in America and throughout the Western world by way of slavery. And that has always been somewhat obfuscated under other types of ideas of, manufacturing and building and all these different things that they wanted to give credit to America for, but really how America became exceedingly wealthy in the time that it did was because of being able to produce their goods and many services uh, under under peoples who were in the bonds of servitude. So slavery was very key to that to that to that process of capitalism really growing here in the West, and that was a very strong point that was made. So that's very key. So you couldn't get away from that. Not only taxes, but literally slavery played a key role in expanding and strengthening capitalism here in the West. That
Yeah,
was
man, but it's time to get our gender war on, man. What are you talking about? Yeah, man. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the links to what we're going to go over next, so that way you could be able to go over this information on your own. Because when you actually went to school, you can actually post links to actual articles. Like when I asked for you to post your source material, you don't come with misinformation and disinformation. You come with the actual sources of articles. So that way you can be able to have that. But don't worry, these people just pretend like this never happened, like everything else never happened. Because, it's all about popularity and entertainment at this point.
yeah.
Not not learning these things for the good, and so that way you could be able to move on. So which one of these you want to go to first, to go?
Well, really, what I want to pull up here first is the pamphlet on the official justification of South Carolina's secession in 1860 of 1860.
Okay.
In that pamphlet, we want to go to page. It will say 7 of 8. It'll be at the top. You'll see it there. If you can just move the page to page 7 of 8. We want to go down to the which is 7 of 8 pages. If you can see that, and let me see how far down we have to go. I want to make sure because it's hard to.
No, it's no, we
Are
got
you
this.
are you able to get it? Yeah, you should be
I
able to get
got it. 7 of 8. Let me blow this up. Again, if only we had the same technology to where we could be on the live stream, present our arguments versus each other in real time. But technology doesn't exist, so
it.
forced
It's
to do it this way.
it's It says 7 of 8. And it'll be on, and on this document, literally on the physical document from South Carolina, it'll say page 9. But we want to go down to, I think, just the second or third paragraph where it says, "We affirm." Now, this is the pamphlet for the official justification for South Carolina's secession of 1860.
The first person to secede, by the way. The first person to leave the Union.
Exactly correct. This is from their archives. This is them. This is not somebody writing this down and saying this is what we think, or this is what we, are trying to parse out of this. No, this is what they actually said. And it says, "We affirm that these ends for which this government was instituted have been defeated, and the government itself has been made destructive of them by the action of the non-slave holding states. Those states have assumed the right of deciding upon the propriety of our domestic institutions and have denied the rights of property established in 15 of the states and recognized by the Constitution. They have denounced as sinful the institution of slavery. They have permitted the open establishment among them of societies whose avowed object is to disturb the peace and the allowing, whose avowed object is to disturb the property of the citizens of these other states. They have encouraged and assisted thousands of our slaves to leave their homes, and those who have remained have been incited by emissary books and pictures to servile insurrection." Hang on a second. "For 25 years, this agitation has been steadily increasing until it has now secured to its aid the power of common government. Observing the forms of the Constitution, the sectional party has found within that article establishing the executive department the means of subverting the Constitution itself. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union, and all the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, whose opinions and purposes are hostile to slavery. He is to be entrusted with the administration of the common government because he has declared that the government cannot endure permanently half slave, half free. And that public mind must rest in the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction." This is what is written in the justification for the South's secession. Other things were mentioned, but the key piece here is slavery.
The main idea of the paragraph, if you will.
And it was mentioned quite a few times here. Not to say that we haven't heard anything of taxes or anything of that nature, or states' rights, or from other aspects of the fugitive slave law and so forth, which played a key role, of course. All that is, but that has been, that's where it's at. Here's one last piece I'm going to read, and then there's a lot more to read through, but I just want to make sure that we're very clear here. As we move forward, we're going down to the next to the next page. We'll say page 10, but that will be still page 8 of 8. if you want to move a little bit further down, MOT.
Yep, I'm down there.
This sectional combination for the subversion of the Constitution has been aided in some of the states by elevating to citizenship persons who, by the supreme law of the land, are incapable of becoming citizens. And their votes have been used to inaugurate a new policy hostile to the South and destructive to its peace and safety. On the 4th of March next, this party will take possession of the government and has announced that the South shall be excluded from the common territory, that the judicial tribunals shall be made sectional, and that a war must be waged against slavery until it shall cease throughout the United States. This is what these people are fighting for. Okay? That is what they are fighting for. There's more to read here. People can certainly read through it. But this is what South Carolina, land of my grandma, grandpa, and all them, or they call it South Kakalaki. This is what South Carolina had to say. Anybody coming up, well, Lincoln was, he was coming up with this one, and Kerwin's law. All of this stuff is ancillary to this because they were all trying to make some kind of potential concessions to keep the Union whole. But the Southern states were not playing that game and were not listening to it because they wanted to secede from the Union because they felt that slavery was going to be literally knocked out totally. So they did not want slavery to be eliminated. Now that's South Carolina. This is not certainly anything that anyone is sitting here proposing an idea. This is what they had to say. There it is. It's there. They weren't talking about taxes. Not to say that taxes was something that was not going to be spoken about, but that certainly was the was the issue. Now, MOT, what I want you to do is I want you to go over to where it says Philip Magnus. Before you start claiming that tariffs caused the Civil War, this is what he has written. If you can pull that up very quickly, and let's read from that. This will be very quick because he's actually kind of funny when he brings up. Can you find that?
I have it up. It is on the screen as of now.
Okay, let's
Oh,
see.
make it a little bit bigger so that way people can read it.
Okay, here you go. All right, this is the good doctor. This is the true Dr. Phil, not that other clown we see running around, on TV and doing some of the things he's doing. But this is a legit. What he says is here. It is an argument we've all heard before. Tariffs really caused the Civil War. The claim is unequivocally an error and was the historical byproduct of a conscious Confederate diplomatic strategy to draw the free trade oriented Great Britain to its side in the war, despite the latter's anti-slavery disposition. Now he goes on further to say there is a subtler truth, though, that tariff politics intruded upon the secession crisis, but it is more analogous to another cup of gasoline tossed into a raging inferno than the causal spark that lit the fire. Oddly, this nuance is lost upon both those who peddle the causal tariff argument and most of those who set out to to rebut them. And then he goes on to mention that Andrew Napolitano, I don't know if the other person had mentioned this individual, committed the first error by offering an iteration of the tariffs argument on The Daily Show. And he talked about The Daily Show and how we got lit up and people were here trying to, debate this. So you have these crew of people out here who are out here now, once again, trying to peddle, a reason why I bring up because they're here trying to peddle that that lie or that twist of history and truth. So a note to historians and political commentators alike who feel the urge to comment on the tariff issue in the Civil War, libertarians should also read this post before weighing in on anything that's Civil War related. So he kind of gets in that and says, listen, if you want to get into this, you better know what you're talking about. Point number 1, you need to understand where the moral tariff came from. That's key. It was not a Civil War measure. Once again, it was not a Civil War measure. The moral tariff, its genesis is actually almost 3 years before the secession crisis broke out. The tariff being a popular protectionist prescription to fix the Panic of 1857. In other words, think of the 19th century Keynesian stimulus package. All right. Its full legislative history is detailed. He talks about it in his article and so forth that he has written more and doesn't really want to get so much into it here. But he is basically saying that you have to look at. He doesn't mean to indulge in an act of self-promotion. You should be aware that very little detailed analysis has been performed on the history of the moral tariff outside of these articles, and a few ancillary pieces referenced within. So, you need to read these articles and get a better idea. He looked at this and not a lot has been really cogently flushed out about the moral tariff. And then he sits down and says, you need to understand what the moral tariff did. The moral tariff was an overtly protectionist law that sought to reverse the course of trade liberalization initiated with the Walker Tariff of 1846 and expanded upon by the slight rate reductions with the Tariff of 1857. As with most overtly protectionist legislation, it was the direct product of a collusive and sometimes corrupt arrangement between members of Congress and private industries that benefited from the taxes that were placed upon their foreign competitors. In other words, processes that economists use, what they call kind of rent seeking, or kind of taking money from these guys. So you can actually see how this tariff was kind of used, and you had some northern favorites and some others who were in there who actually were benefiting from this. But since the legislative favor peddling of this sort can breed political backlash, the authors of the law were also quite clever in obscuring or even denying their part in this corruption. Very interesting. So this was the primary question addressed in one of his key articles that he said in doing so, and he also calculated the equivalent tariff rates on some of the main beneficiary products to illustrate its deeply protective character. So again, if you want to make claims about the moral tariff's severity or what it was intended to do, you also need to kind of read these articles and get a better idea of what these tariffs were really about. And it was really protectionism of northern corporations that were really benefiting from that in a big way. And a lot they call it corrupt because some companies and so forth that had money could really kind of donate more and kind of get seen a little bit more. They kind of got that juice as well. So it really wasn't anything that really did much, but protected more, once again, northern corporations more so. And it wasn't a part really of this Civil War, but it got tacked onto it, and we'll get into that in a second. You need to understand the moral tariff's relationship to the secession crisis. This is where things get a little tricky. Now, he gets into this now. This is where things get a little tricky, so meaning that he doesn't want people to get confused. As noted, the moral tariff was not the cause of the Civil War, but it was also far from absent in Civil War secessionism. By an accident of timing and an unanticipated effect of the 1860 election on a previous legislative maneuver on the pending tariff bill, the moral tariff arrived in the Senate in December 1860. Its progress was both a source of complaint for the already agitated Southern secessionists and an assisted result of their departure from the Senate, although its passage was likely only hastened by a few months. The incoming Congress was significantly more disposed towards protectionism. Those were the Republicans, so forth, coming in. Unscrupulous beneficiaries of the tariff in Congress also seized upon this opportunity to advance and strengthen the protective character of the bill, just as the country was falling into pieces around them. Hence, the moral tariff passed a few days prior to Lincoln's inauguration. While again, this was not the cause of the war, it was indisputably an irritant during the secession crisis, albeit of secondary consideration to the slavery infused causal instigators of the Deep South's departure. A fuller discussion on this issue may be found in his deep articles that he has written on tariffs and secession, of which he feels you should read. And also, he says his next fourth key point is you need to understand the subsequent use of the moral tariff in Civil War politics. All right. Quite simply stated, the moral tariff provided the basis of a political argument to stir British sympathy with the South, with the hope of attaining recognition or even wartime support. This was a joint result of hapless mismanagement of the tariff issue in the North and a conscious diplomatic strategy pursued by the Southerners. The moral tariff provided the Confederates with a tangible rift to separate the North from Britain and thereby obscure the issue of slavery in their own international diplomatic engagement. To the Northerners, who derived material benefit for protection, it also became a font of graft that almost unwittingly poked Britain in the eye. The best scholarly article on this is with, once again, Dr. William Palin, he's written deeply on this, and is only available kind of behind a paywall if you want to get there. But you can also look at this through the New York Times Disunion blog. This by no means encompasses that all may be said about the moral tariff or its relationship to American Civil War, but it should provide a starting point. And then he gets into there's got to be a little more reading to do so on this. But these are key critical issues that were brought up that none of these guys who were talking about this have even properly made it together. They haven't even cogently spoken on that whatsoever. So I just wanted to make sure that we talk about this with the good doctor. And then I just wanted to move over to this one piece here, and this is big. And MOT, I don't know if you put this in here. The essential Civil War curriculum, and this is
I do have
tariffs.
that.
You
Hold
have
on a
that, right?
second. Yep,
Yep.
we'll pull it up. Which part of this document you want me to go down to?
Okay, now we've got a bit here, so let me just give me a second because this is getting what we really want to do is we want to talk about, because he really gets into this, and this is a compilation of quite a few people who were here Dr. Reinhardt, Dr. Palin, Dr. Freeling, and of course Dr. Magnus is putting this together. But as he gets through this and he begins to really break this down, this is tariffs in the American Civil War, and it's broken down in quite a few pieces where he gets into the political economy of tariffs, the tariff before the Civil War, and gets into everything that starts from 1879 and brings it up to the mid 18th century, to the mid 19th century, as they were talking about the tariff issues that they were having at the end of the of the 18th century or the 1700s, where they started to encounter their first issues of in their first Congress in 1789, and protection of tariffs received a very powerful advocate and so forth. So it gets really into that, and then you start really starting getting, this is after of course the American Revolution, and then it gets into the moral tariff, and a reversal of course, and it starts taking, and we start to see how things are starting to take shape at the end of August 1857. To where Buchanan and them were looking at it. This is what I wanted to state right here, because we're coming down a little bit. MOT, can you go where it says the moral tariff and a reversal of course? Can you look at that?
Yes, sir. Hold on a second.
All right. Okay. And then we come down a couple of paragraphs there, and we see, though slavery. Can you read that? Okay, I think it's the
There we
third
go.
part. Though
There we go.
slavery was at the forefront of the contest, the tariff issue played a determinative role in the 44 ballot stalemate over the selection of a new Speaker of the House when Congress reconvened in 1859, December. The Republican plurality initially favored the Ohio Representative John Sherman. The protectionists aligned with Morrill. Amidst the extended 2-month balloting period, free trade Democrats twice rebuffed an attempt by a group of know-nothings and Pennsylvania Republicans to swing the contest behind a Democratic speaker who would permit an upward tariff revision in place of the anti-slavery Sherman, who was actually running for who's actually going to be running for a presidential spot. But anyway, the Democrats' refusal to budge on the tariff and the inability of the Republicans to produce a majority for Sherman forced the compromise to occur. Forced the compromise.
Go ahead.
Forced the compromise to occur on slavery. Okay, so here we go. When you saw the other person bringing up these other stuff, oh, Lincoln was this and that and all that. Everyone was trying to figure out a way to look to see how they could potentially avoid this war. The South was already breaking out, but people were looking to figure out ways how to bring this thing to some type of compromise to where you wouldn't have a civil war. But anyway, so this would be forced to compromise to occur on slavery. In early February 1860, Sherman withdrew in favor of William Pennington of New Jersey, a relatively unknown freshman Republican who signaled that he would make modest accommodations towards the Southern slave owners. So they were still working to work this out, and they were talking about these tariffs and so forth. But Sherman received the chairmanship of the House Ways and Means Committee as consolation and promptly asked Morrill to produce an overhaul of the tariff schedule. So these guys were all trying to work this out. This Morrill tariff was really something that wasn't really favored, certainly by the South, but this was something that they were trying to use in some ways to try to placate, if they could, the North. The South to a degree. And then as we go down, it says the moral tariff easily MOT, if you can take us down to where it says the moral tariff easily passed the House on May 10th, and on a vote of 105 to 64, it kind of gets into that. And then underneath, it says the next paragraph where we look at well, it says, well, I may want to no, where it says, though locked in a stalemate again on the national level, the tariff issue actually played an important regional role in the 1860 election. So, as the Democratic Party divided into two factions over slavery, the Republicans assembled an eclectic anti-slavery coalition by appealing to a list of regional and secondary issues. Newspaperman Horace Greeley described this strategy in a letter outlining the characteristics of a winnable campaign. I want to succeed this time, yet I know the country is not anti-slavery. It will only swallow a little anti-slavery in a great deal of sweetening. An anti-slavery man per se cannot be elected, but a tariff, river and harbor, Pacific Railroad, free homestead man may succeed, although he is anti-slavery. The selection of Abraham Lincoln, an anti-slavery former congressman who described himself as an old Henry Clay tariff Whig, almost perfectly fit Greeley's prescription for the Republican ticket. While Lincoln was presently adverse to leading a national campaign on the tariff issue to avoid alienating the free trade Bryant faction of the party, Hunter's roadblock in the Senate had inadvertently provided the Republicans with an opportunity to secure a critical swing state of Pennsylvania, and with it, the presidency. As historian, once again, as we mentioned him earlier, Reinhard Luthen noted, by mid-1860, the tariff issue mounted to a fever heat in Pennsylvania. A carry back to Pennsylvania delegation to the Republican convention in Chicago secured a platform plank endorsing a tariff adjustment to certain imports as to encourage the development of the industrial interests of the whole country. The state's favorite son candidate, Simon Cameron, also reported released his delegates to Lincoln at that strategic moment after receiving assurances that the eventual nominee would be a tariff man. So they were using this tariff piece as a political leverage to get someone in who they thought could potentially work a little bit with the southern states as they were already seceding. But that was the key issue. So when you looked at Lincoln saying he was trying to settle certain things in certain kind of ways, he was a candidate who they felt that could potentially somewhat appeal a little bit to both. In the end, that did not work because the South did not trust or want to deal with the Republican Party because they were going to end slavery, and they weren't even going to deal with somebody who was talking about they wanted to cut a little deal with them either. So that's how that ultimately went down, and they were going to secede pretty much regardless. Some of the states had already gone into it and had done that. And he goes on further to talk about the tariff and the secession winter. It's a whole nother big piece that I actually want to read in, but I'm going to sit down and do a lot of reading here. And I know some people get, the attention span can get a little short, but the points here are absolutely made that these tariffs and all of this came in here. All of this was ancillary, secondary to the key point of slavery being eliminated. When the Republican president got elected and they were an abolitionist party, that was it for the South. And it wasn't about taxes, it was about the abolition of slavery.
Hopefully, this push this issue to bed, man. I think Juneteenth was the actual place where we can do this, so that way it's here forever. more short videos of reading discredited people. You now have a whole live stream where it's there. But don't worry about it. You're too stupid to want to pay attention to entertainment. You're probably going to miss it. And at this point, you deserve to fail if you're still over there. So, no, you got anything else before we get up out of here?
No, I just think there's a lot here. I would like people to certainly refer themselves to this article. There's a lot to read here, which is very good, which will clear up a lot of your thinking. The essential Civil War curriculum, and this is primarily headed certainly by Dr. Philip W. Magnus and his contributing authors who were here also. That people should look into and look into their books. But these are very well established, high end professionals on this side who are literally historians and PhDs in this area who speak on this quite cogently and with great intelligence and detail, because this is a very detailed article and people can really get into it those who are interested in reading and interested in looking at history realistically. It's a great read, and there's certain things you just cannot get around. So I just wanted to say that, and the people who are trying to obfuscate the truth here and push on other narratives, and we're saying this year on Juneteenth, you have to be suspicious of what types of motives that they're operating on, especially if it's a so-called black man. You have to really question what the motives of someone who was pushing this. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right. So, there you have it. We have proven our point. We have provided scholars. We provided links to the actual information, historical information. What I asked for, the actual standard that I put forth, is what I simply asked for. Show me the background information, show me the actual scholars. And that is exactly what we did during this live stream right here. So, with that said, I want to thank you guys for coming through on this Juneteenth special. I don't know how you celebrate Juneteenth rather than recognizing that people had to actually let those slaves go in order to actually end the Civil War. So, we came in talking about, pretty much how the slave was the cornerstone of society that was not equal to the white man in any way, who was not supposed to have equal protection under the law within their quote unquote equitable system. So with that said, I want to thank you guys for coming through. I'm the man tomorrow. You guys have a really nice rest of y'all night. Peace.
MOT.
Yeah.
Just one last thing. I just wanted to say, don't forget, at the culmination of this war, we did have well over 180,000, over the 200,000 black soldiers who did fight in that Civil War conflict to help to gain our freedom as well. Um, and and it was transformative. So black people yourselves, we played a very big role in getting our own freedom, and we still have to fight for that on a daily and consistent basis, because there are those who are still fighting for it. So you can win the war, you can win the battles, but still lose the war if you're not careful, and that war is still being fought today. It has not ended, and some of our enemies today are some of us, as they were then, and some of us, and we have to understand that as well. And information is the fulcrum, rests on the fulcrum of this battle, and we have to understand how that works as well. Anyway, MOT, listen, thank you very much for inviting me up here, and a wonderful show.
All right. Thank you so much for coming through. Make sure you like the video on the way out. You guys have a really nice rest of y'all night. Peace.